Hello, students. This is Alicia Bradley again. I am coming to you to bring you some updates for this week. I'm going to be talking about the behavior change plan, your specific assignments for this week to get completed, just so everybody is on the same page. Then we're also going to talk about the journaling, when to start the journaling and how to journal, and then the test anxiety strategies. We're going to go through some of those. All right, so the first thing agenda is the behavior change. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. All right, behavior change. So I created an example just to give everybody clarification on how these should look. And several of you have already posted these into the discussion board on Blackboard and have done a wonderful job. They look fabulous, and it's exactly what I wanted. Kudos on that. Good job. So this is my example. So what is my personal study behavior change that I will address? So I'm going to address test anxiety reduction. So I'm going to do practice on that. My concrete measurable goals to address this problem are: I will take a 50-question ATI practice exam in a test-like environment 2 times a week. During the practice test, I will practice the grounding technique 2 times for anxiety reduction. So the reasons that I'm ambivalent about making this change is because I'm concerned that I must go away from my house to find a test-like environment, and that my house is very loud and distracting. How will I benefit from changing this behavior? I believe this will help to reduce my anxiety on my nursing exams. How will I reward myself? If I reach my weekly goal, I will get a pumpkin spice latte from Starbucks on Saturday. How will I measure whether I carried out my concrete goals? So I will journal, and I will keep a log on the days that I take the practice test. So this is my example. How you post this is, I don't want you to attach this as a attachment to the discussion board. I want you to highlight everything, copy it, and then we're going to go over to Blackboard. I want to go from the very beginning. So you'll scroll down if you're under my course, and you'll go to discussion board, click on Bradley Fall, and then study behavior change plan. You'll hit reply, and then I want you to paste everything into there. All right, I'm not going to submit because I've already submitted. So that's how you do the behavior change plan. The next one, also I want to mention, so you'll see that is exactly how these students did it. They did it correctly. And they've responded. So several of these have responded to 2 classmates, and that's exactly what you have to do this week. So several of you have already completed the assignment, which is amazing. Great job. This is all that you have to do. Now, as far as the journaling goes, so I'm going to pull that up. This is the journal about the study behavior change. So here I'm going to put my name. My behavior goal is to take 2 ATI practice exams in a test-like environment 2 times a week. And my expected benefits are reduction of test anxiety. Ooh, sorry guys. Old Navy's trying to email me, and that just pulled. There we go. All right, so expected benefits, test anxiety reduction. So week 1, so this is the first week that I've integrated this behavior change. So that should probably be next week for you all, starting maybe on Monday. So you'll put the date and time of the journal, and then your accomplishments. So did you take 1 exam already this week on Monday? Possibly. So on Monday, I took 1 exam So one exam has already been taken. Then your supports. So my support was my husband helped watch my child so I could go to the library practice exam. Or maybe I stayed after school so that I could do it right after I got out of school, and then I could be in my test-like environment. Really, school would be the best test-like environment because this is where you take your exams. So just a hint there. Barriers. Maybe this week I had to work 4 days a week, and maybe it was midnight shift. So I was exhausted and it was really hard. So each week, even though you meet your accomplishments, you're going to have supports and barriers each week. So even if you completed your exam for the week, you're still going to have barriers. Maybe your barriers are that you had to find childcare, but you found childcare and you still completed the exam. And then your second journal for the week would be, hopefully this will be your accomplishment that you did both tests for the week and you met your goal. So your supports, maybe you knew that if you took that second test and you really wanted a pumpkin spice latte, that helped you do that second test. And then maybe your barriers again are schoolwork. You just didn't feel like taking another practice test after you took 3 tests this week. I don't know. You know specifically. Just reflect on what kind of was a barrier that pushed you away from completing your goal. All right. So we talked about the behavior change and when to start journaling. The next thing that I would like to talk about is the test anxiety. So test anxiety strategies. I just want to zoom in. So here is just some test anxiety. This doesn't talk specifically about grounding techniques, so I'm going to discuss that here. Pre-test. So before your test, you need to prepare, obviously, for the exams. You need to do practice test questions. And I would, when I was in nursing school, and I teach this to my students as well, I got myself in what I called test mode. So I told myself, because what would end up happening to me, and this would cause me to be unsuccessful on exams, not unsuccessful as failure, but not the scores that I wanted specifically. So I would be studying until the last minute of the exam because there was so much content. Well, that got me in a very specific, I wasn't thinking broad, and I wouldn't do well on the tests. So what I started doing was I got myself in test mode. So the day before the exam, I didn't let myself study past like 2 o'clock. After 2 o'clock, the only thing I could do was practice test questions. So I would do a ton of test questions the night before the exam. Then the morning of, I would wake up. I would, obviously eat breakfast, take care of myself. Self-care is so important in helping reduce anxiety. Exercise and anxiety are so closely linked. If you're not getting enough exercise, that's very high. It's going to be more likely that you suffer with anxiety. So maybe just incorporating exercise in will help you. Anyway, so I would wake up and then I would take 10 to 20 practice test questions because I didn't want to fatigue myself on test questions the morning of. So I'd just take a few, and that would get the wheels turning in my brain and get me in what I called test mode. So practice test questions. Also practice anxiety reduction through breathing and relaxation strategies. So I'm sure you all have learned about breathing techniques. So as a doula, I've learned a lot about this. So pretty much all you need to do is focus on making your exhales longer than your inhales. And sometimes it will help you if you just put your pen down while you're taking a test and give yourself a moment to focus on your breathing, to ground yourself, and help relieve your anxiety. Because what we know about anxiety is there's different levels of anxiety. Like the minimal level of anxiety is normal. That's what helps us get stuff done. However, if you start to build your anxiety and you don't have any means of coping with that anxiety, it starts getting worse and worse and worse. So until it gets to a panic level of anxiety where you feel like you are dying, which some of you may be familiar with panic attacks. And that is, that's very scary. You never want to be in that place. I've seen students get in that place during tests and have to be carried away in an ambulance because we don't know if, what's going on with them, and they literally have a panic attack during a test. So I want to equip you with coping strategies in order to help reduce that anxiety before it gets to a high level. So breathing and relaxation techniques. So guided imagery is another one. So you imagine that you are in a different place, like some place that makes you feel really relaxed, such as everybody uses the beach as an example. And you think in your head, okay, I'm at the beach and my toes are in the sand and the sand feels really warm on my toes. And I hear the waves crashing and the wind is blowing in my face and I hear the seagulls. And you just kind of take yourself away from the environment that's stressing you out. And you focus on an environment that is a good, positive, relaxing environment. The next one that I have noticed to be the most useful for my students is the grounding technique, which is you need to ground yourself to reality. So with anxiety, we know the main problem is anxiety causes us to kind of not really be able to relate to reality. So we can't recall information. We kind of just separate from reality. And that's what the grounding technique is all about. The grounding technique is orienting us to our reality. So you tell yourselves, I like to orient myself. So I like to say, today is Friday, September 22nd. It's about 3:30. My pen is blue. I'm in the nursing building at the University of Louisville. And I am sitting in Miss Bradley's class or Miss Bradley's office. There is a clock on the wall, and my shoes are black. So really, you just orient and you ground yourself to what is real. So you can ground yourself to things that you see, things that you feel. So tactile. You can also ground yourself to things that you're hearing. So maybe you hear papers rustle. So you're grounding yourself to reality. And that is very useful for people that struggle with anxiety. So you use cognitive strategies to visualize success and limit images of failure. So this is all about your perception. You see yourself getting an A on this exam. Also, you prepare emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and physically for the test. Water, you're going to eat good before the test. You're not going to feel hungry. Maybe for a lot of students, this is a little TMI, but I always had this one friend in nursing school. He had IBS and he would have to go to the bathroom 3 times before a nursing exam. So make sure that you, like if that's you, just go and do that before the exam. Also, praying helps a lot of people who are spiritual. Praying will really help minimize anxiety. Maybe it's all about, I know for me, I would listen to some, Christian music on my phone, and I would step away from all the other students and I would listen and I would pray with my 2 friends and then we would go on to the exam. That really helped me. Another thing, so test time. So now it's test time. We need to arrive early, be comfortable, and then food for thought. So we need to eat. We need to make sure that we are fed. Avoid over anxious peers and conversation. Oh my gosh. This is the worst thing in nursing school. Everybody sits near each other waiting for the door to open for them to go into the exam. And everybody's like, tell me what the normal ABG level is for PaCO2. And like they're quizzing you. And that starts really getting your adrenaline going. And for people that are anxious and struggle with test anxiety, that is really bad for you. And it's also really bad to go after the test and sit near those same people who are like, how do you feel like you did on this one question specifically? That can really build some anxiety. So I stepped away. There were a couple of students that like a couple of my classmates that were in my study group, I felt totally comfortable with them. And we stepped away. I listened to my music. We would pray together, and then we would go in. So identify and distinguish symptoms of test anxiety. Reset your anxiety button. So this is something that I see with my students. I've noticed that some students will miss questions all in a row. And I'm like, she was struggling with some test anxiety right there, and she may have not noticed it, but she just missed all those questions in a row. So I bet that's what was happening. So make sure that you can recognize when you are starting to get anxious. The wheels are turning and can't stop turning, or you notice that your breathing is starting to get more faster, or maybe you're one of those that twirls their hair or clicks their pen or taps their foot. If you're noticing your body is start to doing those things, do a little check-in. Say, okay, where am I at? Drop your pen, drop what you're doing, and do a technique. Do a breathing technique. Do a relaxation technique. Do a grounding technique. So use practiced breathing techniques. You need to practice these. Like up here, it says practice these anxiety reduction techniques, which is why on my behavior change plan, I said that I was going to practice this 2 times a week, because test anxiety is really what I'm struggling with. Practice that. So then I will use that on my actual exam. Notice negative thinking and counter it with positive. So this is another trap that students get into. They get to a question and it's really long. First of all, they look at it and they're like, oh my gosh, it's really long. And they just get overwhelmed and they start freaking out, and anxiety starts building right there. Just take it one sentence at a time. If you see a long question, say, okay, I can get through this. Just take it one sentence at a time. Just read through it. Then let's say this same very long question is very hard and you have no idea where to begin. So I always tell my students, start with what you know. So let's say that we're talking about a COPD patient who had ABG levels that were not normal, and maybe he was in respiratory distress, and they are asking you what the priority intervention is. Maybe the ABG levels, you look at them and you say, I don't know if those are not normal. But what you can do is say, I do know with COPD patients, an important intervention to help them with respiratory distress is you need to elevate the head of the bed and maybe administer some low flow oxygen. So just because you might not know one piece of it, or maybe you don't know all the rest of it, and then you do know the normal ABGs, start with what you know and build from there. So take your time, check your work if possible. Oh, this is another thing. Only change answers you are certain are wrong. Misread the question or the responses. So almost like 90% of the time that students change their question or their answer, they had the right one in the first place. And that's really frustrating for everybody involved. So don't change your answers unless you absolutely see something like you read it incorrectly. and then you know that you need to change it. So check your work in that. I guess you all are doing, you don't do Scantrons here. So you all do electronic testing. So that's not really, but you can read back through the question and make sure that your answer is correct. All right, so that's complete. We've already talked about that. So I think we are all finished for today. If there are any questions about anything, oh, another thing, I talked about test anxiety strategies. There are some resources to assess and to interpret the assessment for test anxiety. I really think everybody in this class should be taking that assessment. You can do it at any point of time. Like it's not an assignment, but just do that evaluation and see if that's something that you may struggle with. And then you can incorporate some of the strategies, because even though you may not struggle with test anxiety per se in one class, there may be a class that you do start to have anxiety on a test. Like I'm thinking about like maybe a student who's male. Like I see this very commonly, does really well in med surg, but then he gets to OB, which is all about women, and they don't have women parts and they don't have women bodies. So they may be very nervous about testing on something that they're not familiar with. So just understand that test anxiety is common, and there are things that you can do to help combat it. And so I guess that wraps up our session today. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you next Wednesday at 4 p.m. I look forward to it. Okay, bye.